Okay, we are live. Looks like everything's working. And yeah, the volume might be loud for this video when I start playing it, but bear with me. Trying to get this. It didn't work at all. My laptop's just gonna be overheating, I guess. Just so annoying. All right, anyway, we'll get into the stream. Today the video we're gonna go over is about The Alchemist. So The Alchemist is a book written by, I think this is how you say it, Paulo Coelho. I think that's how you say it. But essentially, it's a story about a boy that's seeking fame, fortune, riches, and goes out and goes on this journey and hears about this treasure, goes to find it, but in the end, he realized what he was looking for was already at home. And it's a very interesting tale because it's somewhat poetic in the sense that the boy discovers that he already had what he was looking for, but in the sense of the Tolkien quote, not all who wander are lost. That's really the most generic way I can summarize it.
Once upon a time, there was a young prince who was born into a royal palace of countless riches.
It's really bothering me. The sound. I'm gonna prop up my laptop so it hopefully cools off better. Okay, sounds better already.
He wanted a soulmate, so a woman of his exact specifications was delivered to him. He wanted to be admired, so everyone in the kingdom was ordered to sing songs about him. He wanted to be wise.
What is he explaining here? Why is this going slow? So what is he explaining here is like the idea that we think is going to bring us happiness. So like think about when you talk to someone, when you ask them what they want, the majority of times they're like, well, I want a fancy house, I want a fancy car, and it's an empty and it's a hollow goal because the moment they get that one thing, they're going to be wanting the next thing. They're going to need the next thing. They're going to say, you know what? I have this, but I'm still hollow. I'm still empty. And it's always more and more and more and more and more. And that's really what the main message of this book teaches you is that whatever you're looking for, you don't want it. What you really want is stability. You really want peace. You really want fulfillment. You really want love. And if you have those things, it doesn't matter the size of your bank account. It doesn't matter your material possessions. If you have fulfillment in each and every day, what else could you ask for?
So he had every book rebranded to show him as the author. The prince got everything he wanted and lived out his days with a high and mighty sense of pride. Everyone showered him with praise, and he lived happily ever after. The end. How did this story make you feel? Did you find yourself rooting for the prince? If you are a fan of myths and legends, then this story probably feels incomplete. There's no character development, no plot, no setup and payoff.
So essentially, what he's saying here is the hero's journey is the only purpose for life. If everything went exactly according to plan, then there would be no point to live. The fact that we fail, it's the fact that we experience heartbreak, it's the fact that loved ones that we care about die, that really put things in perspective, that really give the sense of urgency, that really give any sort of meaning to anything.
No lesson is learned, and therefore it's not really a story at all. Because the essence of story lies in transformation. It's not about the destination, it's about the experience of the journey. It's not about getting the reward.
So think about what Tolkien said, not all who wander are lost. It's the best way to put it. Like it's not necessarily the end goal, it's what you learn on the path to the end goal. It doesn't mean anything for you to win the lottery, but let's say you make a few $1 million at the end of your life, like that's going to mean so much more because you worked your entire life for it versus just getting it handed to you. Yeah, it might feel good for a second, but you're still going to be empty. You're still going to be hollow. You didn't learn the lessons. You didn't take the losses. You didn't experience the setbacks and the failures and the things that made you get better and better and better and learn how to deal with hardship, learn how to deal with strife.
It's about becoming the person worthy of receiving the reward. As we transform, the world around us transforms. There is a mysterious order to the universe, where every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Everything given must be earned, and everything taken has a price to pay. Some call this order karma, or fate, or divine balance, or cosmic justice.
By the way, this is we're watching After School. I can't believe I wasn't subscribed to them. I feel like we've reacted to a million of their videos, but I feel like I need to start doing that more.
No story illustrates this idea better than The Alchemist by
This is a See, so the thing about this book is it's a very simplistic book. It's This video might spoil it. I'm gonna try not to. I'm gonna try not to put the key plot points, but I think it's gonna be necessary because the video is just gonna spoil it. So what I would say is, it's not gonna ruin it for you because this is a book that's somewhat written in a poetic style, somewhat written in a expressive style, and I think it's a fairly simplistic tale. I don't think it's going to throw you for a loop. I don't think it's going to make you think at all. But what it is going to do is it's going to evoke certain emotions. It's going to make you feel like, you know what? I've been wasting my time doing this. I've been wasting my time trying to please others. Why don't I start living for myself? And, I think that's something that we should all experience. And it's not really like, I don't think the plot points are really going to get the full picture of the story. Like, think about the Lord of the Rings. Everyone knows the Lord of the Rings story. Everyone knows what happens because everyone's seen the movies, but you could still read the books and experience a lot. I think The Alchemist is very similar.
Paulo Coelho. It's one of the most beautiful books ever written, and one I find myself returning to often. If you haven't read it and plan on doing
I think I've read it like 3 or 4 times at this point. Um, it's I don't know where it is, otherwise I'd take it out. It gets around like 200 pages max, but there's a lot of spacing. It's something that you'll be able to fly through in like a day or two, and it's something you're going to enjoy every time you read it.
so, you may want to skip this section. There will be spoilers. The Alchemist begins with a young shepherd boy wandering the Spanish countryside and living a carefree existence. He sleeps in an abandoned church and watches the stars through a hole in the roof. His days are peaceful and comfortable. His only concerns are food, wine, and his sheep. One night, the boy has a profound dream about finding treasure by the Egyptian pyramids. He tries to dismiss the dream as having no meaning, but the universe has other plans for him. The language of the universe speaks to the boy in the form of signs, symbols, deja vu, and synchronicity.
So this isn't specifically a Jungian synchronicity the way that the plot devices occur. It's more of like a Voicean epiphany, where it's like it's telling you what to do. It's kind of a plot device. It's not something that's meant to be prophetic.
Otherwise known as omens. These omens reveal to the boy that the treasure in his dream is indeed real. So the boy sells his sheep and embarks on the long, dangerous journey to Egypt. He crosses the ocean to Morocco and is immediately tricked and robbed of what little gold he has. His quest is off to a terrible start, but with no money to return to Spain, he is stranded in a foreign land. He finds refuge in a small crystal shop and offers to clean glasses in exchange for food. The crystal shop is failing to bring in customers and make profit, but the boy's enthusiastic spirit changes things. Over the next year, he learns Arabic and turns the crystal shop into a thriving business. The boy is making good money and gets comfortable.
I think this is one of the most interesting parts of the story now that I'm remembering. I remember you bringing this up yesterday, Sahita, the crystal shop. But it's interesting because it's like think about it, we're born with dreams and then we kind of say, you know what, I'm going to work this job for a little bit so that I can have money saved up so that I can have stability. And then once you get a little bit established, you're like, you know what, I'm safe. I'm going to play it safe. And I think that's really describing how most adults live their lives. Most adults live their lives not experiencing the other side of safety, not experiencing that risk, not experiencing those dreams. And not to say that they would ever work out, not to say that they would ever come to fruition, but wouldn't you rather know than not know? Like I think not knowing if something could have happened, not knowing if you could have been good enough is one of the I don't know, I don't think there's very many things that people should be guilty about, but that's definitely one of them.
But the omens tell him it's time to move towards the Egyptian pyramids to find his ultimate treasure and fulfill his destiny. So he says goodbye to the crystal shop and begins the treacherous trek across the Sahara. The heat is blistering, the winds are wicked, and to add further danger, there is a tribal war happening all around him. The boy manages to make it to an oasis, a lush green safe haven where he receives a warm welcome. But shortly after, he has another prophetic dream about the oasis being attacked. He warns the people of the oasis, and the very next day, the oasis is attacked by a band of dishonorable tribal warriors. Because of the boy's warning, no one in the oasis is harmed, and the
And none of these, I wouldn't say the plot points aren't important because they obviously drive the story, but all kind of a device to evoke certain questions in the boy. They're all trying to, in some way, make him think about something that he has not thought about before, make him experience something that he hasn't before. We were just talking about this in a group the other day, that even if you don't go after what you want and let it rest, you still don't feel good and it doesn't leave you even then. Yeah. No, that's for sure. Because you'll always have that question, what if? And I think the what ifs are meant to be answered at some point in your life. And if you never answer them, then it's always going to be eating away at you. And even if you fail, then you knew that it wasn't worth it. Then you knew you weren't good enough. Then you knew that, you know what, maybe it just didn't work out. The cards weren't in my favor. I think that's better than not knowing. Because if you don't know, then there's always that what could have been.
attackers are all killed. The people of the oasis celebrate the boy, and he is offered a position of power. He also meets a girl, Fatima, and falls deeply in love with her. Once again, the boy gets comfortable. With money, love, and status, he could stay in the oasis and have a great life, but the omens tell him he must carry on to the pyramids to find his treasure. This is when the boy links up with the alchemist, who serves as the boy's guide on the final leg of his journey. The alchemist teaches the boy how to tap into his heart, decipher the omens, and speak to the soul of the world.
And honestly, comfort is one of the greatest. Obviously, comfort's good because you don't want to live in fear. You don't want to live in your fight or flight. It's, you need a certain level of comfort, but comfort at the same time also makes you complacent. And complacency is the death of creativity. If you're complacent, if you don't have that hunger, if you don't have that drive, if you don't want to create, then you'll stagnate. And if you're stagnating, you're as good as dead. If you're in the wild and you don't continually adapt, your species will die out. Think of it like that. If you're not adapting, then you're already dead. You might as well just dig your own grave because essentially that's what you're doing.
The alchemist tells him that
Like I can't name a sadder existence than going your whole life believing the same things and thinking the same things and being the same person the entire time. Like if you don't experience new things, if you don't at least try to think new things, what's the point? I don't really see one. I don't see one in staying in your hometown and doing what your family has done for generations and not in any way trying to innovate because what's the point? You might as well have been a robot. You might as well have been a block of wood that stays the same. It's very it's very weird.
every search begins with beginner's luck, and every search ends with the victors being severely tested. There's only one thing that makes a dream impossible to achieve: the fear of failure. Eventually, they travel deep into the tribal war zone and find themselves caught in the middle. The alchemist and the boy are captured, their gold is taken, and they are sentenced to death. However, the alchemist tells their captors that the boy possesses special abilities and can transform himself into the wind. He is given 3 days to perform this miracle. The boy is terrified because he has no idea how he's going to turn himself into the wind. But when the time comes, he is able to speak with the soul of the world and see that everything in the universe is one. A mighty sandstorm blows in, sweeping the boy away and astonishing.
By the way, this author, Paulo Coelho, was really influenced by Rumi, and you can tell that through his writing. If you read any Rumi poem, it feels like one long story written by him, essentially.
His captors, so they release him. Finally, he makes it to the pyramids and sees an omen, the scarab beetle, which shows him where the treasure is buried. He begins to dig, but some Arabs see what he's doing and start beating him, demanding to know why he's there. With some of his last breaths, he confesses that he had a dream that there was treasure buried by the pyramids. The leader of the Arabs laughs at the boy for being so stupid as to cross the world because of a silly dream. The leader tells the men to stop beating the boy and move on. But just before he leaves, he turns to the boy and says that he once had a dream about treasure being buried in Spain at an abandoned church with a hole in the ceiling. But this was only a silly dream. Lying in a puddle of his own blood, the boy is filled with content and laughs at the irony of it all. The universe truly does speak in mysterious ways. He had to go on this massive adventure, crossing the Sahara and nearly dying on several occasions, just to learn that the treasure was right under his feet from where he began.
So it's extremely symbolic. It's not meant to be the little literal treasure, but it's meant to play on the idea that those who seek will never find. Because everything that you're looking for, you already have. Everything you're looking for, you already are. I mean, I like to use this analogy a lot. Like when people say self-improvement, become someone better, become someone new, essentially they have it completely backwards because you're not becoming anyone new. You're unfolding the layers of your character. You're Michelangelo chiseling away at the stone and creating the masterpiece that was underneath it. Now, I think if you use that example, then it makes a whole lot more sense. Like what you're looking for, you already are. The bravery you're searching for, you already have. You just need to fight that fear. The characteristics that you feel like you can't show, your creativity, your ability to speak in public, whatever it is, you already have the capacity and the capability. It's just you haven't let that side out. I mean, this is essentially Jungian psychology put in a different way, but essentially everything that you want to be, you already are. Any characteristic which you wish to embody is something that already exists inside of you because you couldn't envy something that you're not. all all envy, all judgment, all sort of things you push onto other people is an insecurity you have with your own trait, your own characteristic. It's all just flipped on its head.
And that's pretty much the end. So why did the story have to unfold like this? Why couldn't the omens just tell the boy that the treasure was there from the start? Why did he have to travel great distances and fight for his life just to return to where he began? Well, this is simply because the journey was never about the treasure. The journey was about becoming who he was meant to be.
Think about like, I'm sure we all know someone that's richer. We all know someone that's very successful. Even a moderate level of success. When they're on their deathbed, are they talking about their riches or are they talking about the experiences they've had? And I think that's a really key distinction because while you may get the treasure at the end, it's not the treasure that means anything. It's everything that went into getting that treasure. It's every relationship you had. It's every friendship you've had. It's everyone that's impacted you that has built you to be the person that could accept that gift.
As Paulo Coelho writes, the reward for our work is not what we get, but who we become. The boy left home as a
It's a I really love that quote. That's a tremendous quote. That's a perfect way of explaining success or triumph. Like, you know, I'm sure we've all seen those like videos, like those motivational videos. Is like some rich guy's like, well, if I lost it all, I'd be able to build it back right away. And then you hear people in the comments are like, no, that's not possible. That's not like, no, that person's so self-confident that I promise you they will find a way. That person deserved and earned that thing because they embodied the traits of somebody who would get that thing. And that's really what he's saying. It's like once you know you can do it once, you know you can do it infinite amount of times. I promise you, Bezos, if you take away all his connections and riches, he would find a way. He really would. He's just, you know, there's a certain level of experience, there's a certain level of I've done these things that it just makes it simple.
sheep like wanderer and returned a wise man. Each time he got comfortable along his journey, the universe invited him to step into the unknown, and each time he did, he was rewarded with something greater. His ultimate reward was the person he became. A man who knew himself on the deepest level, with unshakable faith and the ability to communicate with the soul of the world. He gained a sense of inner peace, which is something no amount of money can buy. It is the privilege of a lifetime to become who you really are. In the end, the boy returned to Spain and found a chest of gold buried under the
Okay, I'm glad I wasn't off base citing Young.
church. But the treasure would have had an entirely different meaning if he discovered it without the journey. We must be careful of anything that is given to us for free. Everything that we get comes with a price. You can pay before or after. Any profound insights or wealth gained without the requisite personal development will be destabilizing or harmful. As Carl Jung famously said, beware of unearned wisdom, which is knowledge that arrives without the inner work, discipline, or maturity needed to hold it. In this context, Carl
Beware of unearned wisdom. Damn. I feel like it all always comes back. I feel like it's always I don't know, you can describe every phenomenon by something.
knowledge that arrives without the inner work, discipline, or maturity needed to hold it. In this context, Carl Jung was warning about psychedelics and the potential for people to use them as a shortcut to enlightenment.
That is like that's a perfect way to put it because I feel like we all know somebody. At least I've had this conversation with a lot of people. Like they're telling me about psychedelics and like, yo, you gotta try it. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And they're like, I felt like at one with everything, and I'm like, okay, man, but like, what are you doing right now with that information? Like, you're still the same person. You didn't make any differences. You didn't make any changes. Like if we're all interconnected, then why don't you try to be the best you can be to inspire everything else that is you? It's such a weird idea. It's like because how many times have you heard someone that like I'm not here to shame anybody for what they do, but like how many times have you heard that same conversation and nobody does anything with that information? Like if you figured out that everyone was all part of the same being, wouldn't you do something with yourself? Wouldn't you take that knowledge and, try to spread positivity, try to spread something good in the world? But then people take that information, do the exact same thing and waste away to nothing. And it's just, I don't get that. You know what I mean?
Psychedelics are a wonderful tool for exploration, but doing psychedelics does not make one enlightened or truly wise. Without proper grounding, it can lead
Aldous Huxley took a ton of psychedelics later on in his life and had like all of these spiritual experiences and became like a very interesting writer to the end of his career. It's one of the most hilarious stories ever because he was already a tremendous writer, and after the fact, he was just like so much better. It's one of the greatest success stories when it comes to that. Again, I don't recommend anybody do that because it's very risky. It could destroy you. There's countless stories of people ruining their lives from taking these illicit substances, and that's why it's illegal. Well, that's not really why, but
to mental illness or an inflated ego. Unearned wisdom is like reading the last page of a book without having lived the chapters. You might see the answer, but you won't understand what it really means. The journey forged the boy.
think about like reading a quote and not understanding the context. That's what it's not supporting shortcuts, though. I don't think it's necessarily wrong to have a shortcut. I think it's like, what is reading? Reading's a shortcut. Reading's a shortcut to having a wealth of experience that takes a lifetime. So it's not, I mean, you can't say that you don't support shortcuts if you read books. It's just it's the manner in which the shortcuts are applied. You know what I mean? Like I would just, generally you're not going to learn as much from the shortcut, but if it vastly speeds up everything, like I don't believe in absolutes in anything. Like I'm not one to tell you like, oh, the utilitarian argument doesn't ever like sometimes it makes sense. But I I can't think of a scenario 99% of the time where I agree with it, but I promise you there's probably one that I do. So it's like I wouldn't make broad sweeping statements like that.
Into someone who was capable of possessing the treasure. Without the journey, he would not be fit to hold it. The Alchemist is akin to the story of the prodigal son in the Bible. Jesus tells the story of a man who had two sons. The younger son said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. The younger son then runs off to a distant country to frolic with prostitutes and indulge in hedonistic behaviors. When the money runs out, the youngest son finds himself desperate and alone. He winds up taking the only job he can get, throwing food to pigs. He can't even eat the food that he gives to the pigs. He's lost everything, his money, status, and pride. So he decides to return to his father, with his tail between his legs, and offer himself as a lowly servant. But when his father sees him, he rejoices, and calls to kill the fattened calf in celebration. The eldest son is hurt by this, and says, "I've stayed by your side and always obeyed
I don't see the connection yet.
you, but you never even gave me a young goat to celebrate with my friends. What gives?" "My son," the father says, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." The lesson here is simple and profound. Taking a treasure that one is not ready for will lead to chaos and destruction.
Okay, he's comparing it to that. Okay.
The youngest son left home
I
a
didn't see
selfish,
the
wasteful
connection to The
sinner,
Alchemist.
but through hitting rock bottom, he learned the errors of his ways and returned home with humility and maturity.
That's a good point.
There are two types of people in this world: those who
I think Job would have been a better example. If you're not familiar with Job, I'll explain it very quickly. So the book of Job in the Bible is known as one of the first, it's not, but it's known as one of the first esoteric texts. This is not even close to true. Um, but essentially, what the book of Job is that there's a man who is tested by God, and there's different versions. In some versions, it's Satan that tempts him. In other ways, in other ones, it's God Himself that takes away Job's fortune and wealth and happiness and health. But essentially, Job at the beginning is a very rich man, has a great family, has everything going for him. The devil wants to test him. He takes away everything that he's ever worked for, gives him boils, rips his family away from him, and he's basically left with nothing. And all of his friends are asking him to rebuke God. All of his friends are asking him to, denounce God and say that this is unfair. How could this ever happen to me? And in the end, he refuses to. In the end, he says, I must have done something wrong. And when he finally talks to God, God says, you didn't do anything wrong, but essentially, you need to understand that bad things happen to good people and it's your duty to deal with it. And in the end, he ends up doubling everything that Job had. But it's an extremely good lesson because it's talking about the idea of justice. It's talking about the idea of fairness. It's talking about the idea that, you know, you could be the best person ever and you could be struck with tragedy. And it's just something that you have to accept. It's something that you have to move on with. It's something that you just have to say, this was the hand I was dealt and I just got to play it. And there's something scary to that. And that's why Job is not often well received. But I think it's also inspiring in the same fact because it kind of echoes the idea of karma in Buddhism. The idea of karma is that your actions echo into eternity. And now it gets completely spun in a whole different bunch of directions, but let's purely focus on your actions spiral into eternity. Um, what this means is you do wrong to someone, they do wrong to someone else, they do wrong to someone else, and the cycle only stops when someone accepts that pain and transmutes it into something better, transmutes it into something positive. Like, think about like a hero origin story. Like someone wronged them and then they build themselves up and then they conquer the dragon. That's essentially what you need to do to overcome this cycle of bad karma. It's essentially what Job is talking about. I think it's very similar with this lesson as well, but essentially all of these different stories are talking about the need to experience life, the need to experience hardship, the need to face pain and face trials and face things that really you didn't deserve, but you got it anyway.
Who are humble and those who are about to be humbled. The process of being humbled will destroy parts of oneself that need to die in order for the true self to be born. Alchemy is an ancient tradition of transforming base materials into noble materials.
So alchemy is two-sided. So depending what source you go to, it's either purely physical or purely metaphysical. And now in all of these ancient schools, there's the physical version and then there's the metaphysical version. So just take Freemasons for example. A Freemason, a Mason, is somebody that works with stone, but then you have the metaphysical Mason who works with the stone and the pyramid of the mind, and it spirals into all sorts of different ideas from there. But essentially, just take that example and understand that all these schools have the physical and the metaphysical. You've talked to Christians who are purely about worshiping the structure of the church, worshiping the Pope, and then you have the people that are really, really into the Bible, that are really talking about the teachings of Christ and the spiritual messages of it. And you know, I lean more to the spiritual, but that's essentially what alchemy is as well. Alchemy essentially was half of people were like, oh yeah, we're going to transmute lead into gold. And it's kind of like the physical is always like the idiot version of it, where the spiritual is the more philosophical, more symbolic, more um, intellectual version of it. So essentially, what the alchemists were is it was a group of people that were seeking the purification of the soul through these allegorical symbols of alchemy, so that they wouldn't be caught by the Inquisition. Essentially, that's what alchemy boils it down to. This is what Jung said. This is what Manly P. Hall said. This is echoed by what's his name, Hermes Trismegistus. It's whenever somebody talks about alchemy, they don't understand it that well.
Like
And so there's a lot of like borderline like schizophrenic people that talk about online. It's like it's not really worth studying. Just like get the basic symbols and understand when it comes up what it means, and that's essentially a lot of it.
changing lead into gold.
Jung was obsessed with it, so a lot of his teachings are alchemical. Um, but
The alchemists combined elements of chemistry, metallurgy, physics, medicine, astrology, art, and mysticism to bend materials to meet their desires. But on a deeper level, alchemy is about spiritual purification.
Okay.
Many alchemists saw the process of refining metals as a metaphor for refining the soul, transforming the base self
I'm
into
glad
something
he
noble.
said that because
This idea of transformation is at the
I,
heart of
I've
every great story.
I've had this discussion with so many people where it's like they just, you know what I mean? Like you can read like one book about alchemy and think you understand it, but the truth is it's something studied for like thousands of years. So there's so many different angles to it. It's like, it's like trying to look for an authority on Christianity and then seeing all the different churches and going, which one do I choose? It's like there's a thousand, if not more, so it's difficult. Speaking of archetypes, I haven't spoke about archetypes today. Um, I did a lot yesterday. Right now we're talking about alchemy.
It's not about finishing the story or getting to the end goal.
Alchemy does focus on archetypes, though. The end goal of alchemy is to be the old man archetype, the enlightened master archetype, the um Gandalf in the context of your own life. The person that is the mentor to others, the person that doesn't deal with their own issues.
The treasure lies in the journey itself. Through experience, we grow. Wisdom is knowledge plus experience. One cannot be wise without experience. Every struggle we've endured has molded our character. The more we experience, the more humble, aware, capable, and wise we become. Anything taken must be earned. If it is not earned, the reward becomes a punishment. Just take, for example, all the people who win the lottery. They are not prepared for that level of wealth, and it often ends up bankrupting them and destroying their life.
Dude, what would you guys do if you won a lottery? There's only one answer. There's only one answer, and if you guys don't get the reference, we're gonna have to look it up. Because I think what is it right now? The lottery's at like 850 million. Something ridiculous. Some like life-changing amount of money. And you already know that like someone's gonna get it and just have the time of their life for like a year and then like be in crippling bankruptcy. Invest? No. If you win the lottery, you best not invest it. You better just donate it all to No, don't tell anyone about it. You guys are no fun. Come on, what are you gonna do? You get, well, let's just say you get 500 million because it's probably gonna be at a billion by the time it comes out. And we'll just say the taxes take out half. It's probably going to be like 60% because it's a lump sum. But what do you guys do with it? What do you guys do with $500 million? There's a simple answer. I need to pull it up. It's so simple. Car collection.
15. Oh, those are your lucky numbers.
Oh wow, that's loud. Okay. Here's the video. You guys ready? Real estate.
15. Oh, those are your lucky numbers. Can I tell you what? Do you know your chances of winning? Slim to none. Slim to none. You're right. Let me tell you, it's 1 out of 200.
Why is she ruining this guy's day?
92 million. What do you think about that? I knew it. You knew it. But your numbers are lucky, though. Am I right? I hope so. Can I ask you, if you won all the money, what would you do with it? Bunch of hookers and cocaine. Oh, okay. That's not good.
That was the answer. No, the answer is you fund all of the ideas that I have. No, I'm trying to think, what would I actually do with it? I'd probably start buying up a lot of intellectual property and actually manage it better than Disney or Warner Brothers could. I think there's a huge market there because essentially all of these like corporate entities can't manage these things and make them profitable, and it would be so easy. Like you tell me that you give me $50 million. I could even make it on a budget. Give me $50 million and I can make a better James Bond movie, and I've never directed anything. Just because it would be my own creation, and I would literally just read an what's the guy's book? Ian Fleming, is that who it is? I would just read a book by him, copy it, scene for scene, boom, instant profit. Like, you know what I mean? It's just so dumb. I would buy a yacht, more like Ben Affleck. And then I mean, at a certain point, I just need to set aside time to write like a whole book series because I think it'd be fun to write something like Dune. It'd also be fun to write coaching. I feel like I've written it extensively enough now where I could publish it into a book, but I just haven't because I don't know. I don't know if it's coherent. I'm trying to think what else I would do with the money though. Because there's honestly at a certain point, if you have hundreds of millions of dollars, you could just live off the interest and set up a bunch of charities. Like I feel like the first thing I would do with that money is one, pay off all my debts, pay off all my family's debts, and like instead of donating to a charity, I'm going to give it to people I know because Lord knows that charities aren't actually giving the money to the people that they're set out to help. They only have to give a third of the money that they make to the people that they help. And even then, they're paying their friends through a different NGO, through a different service. They're overpaying for catering and all of these fundraising. It's one big Ponzi scheme. Why bother thinking about it? We haven't got it. Bro, why you gotta ruin my day? Come on, we're just trying to have a fun thought exercise. Isn't it like exciting to think about what you would do if you're limitless? Because the first step to being limitless is thinking about being limitless. You know what I mean? And I know there's gonna be a day and age where I have like money to just piss away. So it's like, why not start thinking about these things now and have a solid foundation instead of just shooting in the dark? You know what I mean? I don't think it's necessarily wrong to like daydream because a lot of daydreaming has created some of the greatest ideas ever. I mean, if you know anything about Albert Einstein, the dude was in a bubble bath playing with bubbles for hours when he thought about the theory of relativity. And it's like one of the greatest discoveries ever came from something completely ridiculous. Same thing with Tesla. Tesla was just able to pull things from his own imagination. The stronger your imagination, the stronger you can create. And creation really is the pathway out of every problem in your life. Would you rather have supernatural powers or a lot of money? Um, Depends on the supernatural powers. Honestly, like if it's something stupid like turn invisible, like I don't know. I feel like turning invisible would be like the last power I'd want because all you can do is like spy on people and then blackmail them. Like that's no fun. Like give me a cool one like super strength, then maybe you could say that. I don't know. The Lex Luthor in me wants the money.
Their lives. Today we live in a world of quick and easy rewards, which seem to be offered to us freely. Take for instance pornography. Unlimited access to sexual gratification is only a click away.
Bro, what is this guy watching? Such an interesting combination. Dude, do you think people actually have separate monitors set up looking at different things?
A teenager now has access to more graphic imagery than any king in history. Seeing these images comes with a heavy price though. The more one gets sucked down this rabbit hole, the more difficult it will be to form deep, intimate relationships with a partner in real life. Similarly, students who use AI to do their homework, maybe using ChatGPT.
Switch supernatural powers with all-knowing knowledge. You don't want all-knowing knowledge. That's like it's a curse as well as a gift. Because if you knew everything, then nothing would be fun. So definitely supernatural powers. But it also you can't use it to make more money. Dude, if you have all-knowing knowledge, then you could just buy every stock. Like it would just be unavoidable.
To write their papers will improve their grades. But upon graduation, what did they actually learn? Did they really get ahead? And now it is being shown that there is a direct correlation between the use of AI and cognitive decline. So it is time to be very careful when we are offered cheap, easy access to something that feels good. Understand that there is always a price to pay. This is the cosmic balance. But on the bright side, there is always a reward for sacrificing comfort in the pursuit of your destiny. The rewards are usually not immediate, but the work you put in and the suffering.
This side looks like so much fun though. Come on, they got slot machines over here.
you endure will always pay off. The reward may not come in the form of money, but what price would you be willing to pay to become who you want to be? What good?
The answer should be everything. You should give up every part of yourself to be who you want to be. This is the pearl of great price, as Neville Goddard says, or the Bible really says. So essentially, I think it's in Matthew. I want to say it's in Matthew. Let me pull it up. But essentially, the quote didn't come up. Never mind. Pull that up then. There's a part of the Bible where it talks about the kingdom of heaven, and it says the kingdom of heaven is like a pearl of great price, who, when a merchant finds it, gives up everything he owns in order to buy the pearl. And essentially what it's saying is that if you give up everything that you have for this perfect image, that is the kingdom of heaven. And essentially what it's saying is seeking your salvation is finding that image. So like think about it like Nietzsche's Übermensch. It's the exact same idea. Um, not being bound by anything, not being bound by any doctrine or dogma or anything that's holding you back, not conforming for the sake of conformity, not seeking comfort instead of seeking what it is that you really want.
It is treasure if you are weak and ignorant. No amount of money can buy wisdom and integrity. A story that illustrates the bright side of this cosmic balance comes from Anna Lemke's book, Dopamine Nation, in her chapter on the power of radical honesty. A young man named Drake struggled with alcohol and addiction, something that ran in his family. Drake had a habit of partying and driving home drunk. One night, he's pulled over by the police and given a DUI. Luckily for Drake, he had enough money to afford the best lawyer, who could get him off and clear his record. All he had to do is lie and plead not.
One of my professors was a DUI attorney. This is one of the funniest things I've ever heard. So I think at 0.25, it starts becoming lethal. Like when your blood alcohol percentage is 0.25%. He got someone off with a 0.43%. It's like, how do you even do that? Like how do you even operate a car that drunk? It, it honestly baffles me that somebody could even get in a car, let alone be conscious to drive it, let alone be caught by the car, because you feel like you would just fall asleep. Like, it's so insane. There must have been just something so procedurally wrong with the case that you just couldn't pursue it. But that's such a good marketing tool. Like, imagine you're a DUI attorney, you're like, yeah, I got someone off, and they're basically like, we're dead.
Not guilty, and the lawyer would handle the rest. But something strange happened when Drake stood in front of the judge. His conscience jolted him into confessing that he was indeed driving drunk. He was then severely punished, losing his driver's license for a year, sentenced to mandatory DUI classes, and having to pay a hefty fine. The consequence.
I think it's around 10 grand in the US. In all the fees in there's like this, it's insane. I don't know how this is even 'cause it's purely a monopoly. I guess because it's like a government, maybe it's an NGO, maybe it's some sort of exclusive contract or a patent. I have no idea how this is even legal. There's this company that installs this thing in your car that you blow into, and then you have to wait like 10 minutes and it checks if you're drunk or not. And every day that you have it, it's like $1, like $2, and it's like you have to have it for a few years. So minimum that's like that fee is like a few grand. And then you got to pay a lawyer, and then you got to pay the charges, and then if you hit anybody, it's so ridiculous. And then all the insurance premiums, it's like, dude, it's such a money making thing. I mean, essentially, like obviously people shouldn't be driving drunk, but like the pure financial aspect behind it, like it definitely floats a lot of municipalities.
Consequences of telling the truth were initially harsh, but the ordeal caused Drake to stop drinking and get his life together. 10 years later, now a successful doctor, he looks back on that moment of telling the truth in court as the most important positive experience of his life. He could have taken the quick and easy route and avoided the
It's a pretty good
consequences,
story.
but where would he have ended up if he lied? Most likely still an addict, selfish and impulsive. Telling the truth was a painful price.
William Blake said hell is self-justification. And I think that's one of the greatest quotes. Like whenever you mess up, do you try it or do you accept it? Do you say, "Oh, well, I only did this because of this"? Because I promise you, if you say, "I did this because of this, this, and this," you're going to continue to do that behavior. But if you say, "You know what? Maybe this happened to me. Maybe all these bad circumstances happened, but I still didn't have to respond that way." That's the shine. That's the show of true growth. That's the show that you're actually going to stop the behavior. That's you taking responsibility. That's you taking accountability. It's it's really difficult nowadays to preach accountability because I feel like everyone has their own sob story. Everyone wants to be a victim. Everyone wants to get that social credit or social identity that like this wasn't my fault. But in truth, you play a hand even if it's infinitesimally small in everything that happens to you.
But he paid it voluntarily, and for this he was rewarded by becoming the person he was meant to be. There's a saying that hell is the place where the person you are meets the person you could have been. So perhaps heaven is the place where you become who you are truly meant to be the wisest, most competent,
I
noblest,
like
most
Blake's
courageous
quote
individual
better.
possible, to have a deep sense of your soul and inner peace, to live in complete harmony with nature and your loved ones, to lay on your deathbed with no regrets. This is what is within your grasp. Remember, the reward for our work is not what we get, but who we become. It is the privilege of a lifetime to become who you were meant to be.
Dude, he always does these like crazy drawings at the end. No heart has ever suffered when it goes in search of its dreams because every second of the search is a second's encounter with God and with eternity. Okay. That's a great quote. I love that. We will watch another one of these. Hmm. Damn, this guy does a lot of different topics. Let's go to popular ones. I'll be right back in a second. Oh. There's this great version of the Red Book on YouTube. That's probably really intense. Dude, when I was reading the Red Book, I'm like, this is one of the weirdest, most like raw things I've ever read. It's honestly a miracle that Jung was able to like transcribe it and put it into something that you could actually understand. If you could even understand it, I don't know if it's even possible. All right. I promise I'll find one soon that I want to talk about. Some of these are like, I don't know, they don't seem that interesting. Gives like a good summary in the story. Okay. Mm, oh, I'm sure Neil deGrasse Tyson's gonna. We'll watch this because it's too loud.
I just want to just highlight a few things. I'm worried really about how much the fuzzy thinking is going on in the world.
Neil deGrasse Tyson like makes me laugh because I've only seen the same level of worship that Neil deGrasse Tyson has for science in like the most avid religious people. And the same level of undying faith. And it's just like for a man that claims to be for science, he doesn't really understand the first rule of science, which is question everything. And he kind of just, you know what I mean? That's the sense I get from him. Maybe he's different. Maybe, when he's off camera, he does his due diligence, but it doesn't seem to me like he does.
Fuzzy thinking, people just not thinking straight. What we're not valuing is knowledge as process rather than knowledge as an answer.
See, like this guy he's hypocritical in this statement. Generally it takes science like two generations to self-correct, and I feel like we're living in the midst of almost a scientific dark age when it comes to studies, when it comes to academia. Everything is so bought and sold. Everything is so influenced by big money and big investors that, even if it's not necessarily wrong, it's just spun in a way that doesn't really quite tell the whole truth. Think about the news. The news can use legalese to dress up certain events and make it seem like it's not as bad as it really is, or make it seem like it's a whole lot worse. They can use same repeating phrases to kind of evoke a certain narrative and play things up. This is exactly what we see in the intellectual and scientific communities.
If you're an employer and two candidates come up looking for a job, and you're interviewing the two candidates, and you say, oh, for part of this interview, I just want to ask you, what's the height of the spire on this building that we're in? And the candidate says, oh, I was an architect. I've majored in architecture for a while, and I memorized the heights of all the buildings on campus. I know. The height of that spire is 150 feet. In fact, 155 feet tall. Okay, turns out that's the right answer. That's the right answer. And the person came up with it in seconds. That person goes away, the next candidate walks in. Do you know the height of the spire on this building? The candidate says, no, but I'll be right back. Person runs outside, measures the length of the shadow of that spire on the ground, measures the length of his or her own shadow, ratios the height to the shadows.
Again, this is like very ironic that he's saying these sorts of things.
Comes up with a number.
Because there's things that he just blindly accepts that he's been told that he hasn't thought about. Like I've seen several things where he's just like pure cognitive dissonance. It's just, all right, man.
Runs back inside, it's about 150 feet. Who are you going to hire? I'm hiring the person who figured it out, even though it took that person longer, even though the person's answer is not as precise. I'm hiring that person because that person knows how to use the mind in a way not previously engaged. You realize when
So I definitely agree with the point he's making here. It's just I don't necessarily like who it's coming from. Not that I have anything wrong with the guy. I've seen too many instances where this guy has the correct opinion instead of a nuanced one. You know what I mean? Like he accepts the official narrative when there might be more, when there might be, even the thought of questioning it. Like I'm not saying that the official narrative is always wrong. It's just who's telling me this? Why are they telling me this? What do they have to gain from it? Even thinking about these questions usually pokes a hole in a lot of the things that you see on the news, a lot of the things that you see accepted by a lot of people. And that's really the thing that pisses me off. I mean, the entire idea of science, we'll break it down to the scientific method. And this is something that Sir Francis Bacon theorized in when the 1500s, whenever it was, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, well before any of us were alive. And essentially, what it came down to is you have a theory, and you must either prove or disprove the theory. And then this entire idea of science was built off the back of this idea, and everything that we have known, every scientific discovery was built off the past of sci- the past of all of these different scientific discoveries. And it's frustrating because I feel like we've never been dumber as a people because everything is, oh, well, this person said it, so I must just believe it. Instead of the baseline level of logic where it's like, you know what? This doesn't sound right. You know what? I don't necessarily go along with this because it just doesn't add up. Something about it doesn't feel right. That inquisitiveness, we just blindly accept things. And this is not me saying that one side or the other is any different. Everyone in mass is this way, myself included. We need to be more skeptical. We need to understand that don't buy into other people's bullshit, especially your own. That's really what it comes down to. All right, we'll go back. This will be good.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of After School. I'm Mark and I'm the animator behind this channel.
Oh, this is interesting.
Today we'll be watching a clip from my podcast with Daniel Schmachtenberger. I thought this clip was so good that I figured I'd animate it and put it on this channel. So without further ado, let's dive in.
I'm guessing I can. Yeah, I can.
It's so easy if we're not in the
Let me know if there's any problems, because I don't know. Because I know I can react to this guy's channel, but I don't know if I can react to his
place where
podcast.
collapse
Hopefully,
is
I can.
happening, to think that it won't ever happen because we don't have an experience of it, so we don't have an intuition for it, even though the history is that every empire in the history of the world collapsed. That right
Everything collapses. Don't like. It's a. This is a reality that a lot of people like to disagree on. Like a lot of people think everything's going on forever. There's like this hope that we can ever do something in this world that will one day not be forgotten. And the truth is, like, there's gonna be a day and age where everything you know, everything you ever loved, everything that you even thought about no longer exists. And it's like the sooner you accept that reality is the sooner that you stop buying into all of this like needless ideas of we must support this, we must support that, we need to do this, we need to do that. Like, no, no, support yourself. Support your own purpose, support your own mission. Support the things that mean anything to you. Don't don't support something for the sake of the institution. It's going to fall. It's going to end.
before it collapsed, it was usually at its height. That the people at that time didn't think it was going to happen, so they weren't doing any smart kind of guidance or preparation. They were continuing to live in the way that advanced what caused it to collapse directly. So we can be more foresightful than that. It would be nice if we were more foresightful than that. And I'm saying that the timelines of the issues facing the world are such that if people are paying attention right now, they will realize there are things that are much bigger issues than the things you're.
So essentially, what he's about to say is we're like at the fall of Rome in this country. If you look at the fall of Rome, it was caused by a lot of different. More or less, it came down to complacency. More or less, it came down to overextension and political corruption and a famine that all of these things came together to weaken Rome as a empire and eventually let the barbarians get to the chinks in the armor.
You're dealing with in your current life that are impending, that orient really deep life reconsideration. If people haven't.
And essentially, I'm assuming what this guy's going to say is that we can take ourselves out of this cycle. We can take ourselves out of this stage and be reborn better. But the way it's going, the way people think so short-sightedly, um, I don't see it happening. I think things are going to have to get a whole lot worse before anything gets better. And maybe you can prolong the process, but I really don't have hope or faith in politicians. So that's me. But I want to be proven wrong. I don't want to be right.
Everybody should go study the Asch conformity studies and the Milgram experiments, which, I'll just recap very briefly. Milgram experiments, fascinating behavioral psych, where people were brought in to be part of a scientific experiment. They were told that the experiment had to do with the effects of like electroshock therapy on people. There's a person on the other side of the wall who was going to be receiving a shock. They just had to push the button of the level of shock the scientist was monitoring, and what they were trying to do was understand the effect of electric shock. The reality was the person pushing the button was the test case. The person on the other side of the wall that they couldn't see wasn't actually hooked to electric shock. They were an actor, and every time the button was pushed, they made a noise accordingly. But the people in the study obviously didn't know that. That's why the study worked. And so the scientist, the authority in the situation, said, okay, go ahead and do the shock at this voltage. And they'd hear on the other side a groan. And then they'd turn the voltage up and say, now do it. And then turn the voltage up, and the person screams on the other side. And the person who's pushing the button is like, is this okay? Are they all right over there? And the scientist is like, yes, everything is okay. This is what we have to do. This for science. And a humongous percentage of the people continued to push the button because the authority.
It's so weird. But like, okay, have you ever heard like I mean there's a lot of like interesting philosophical when it comes to would you carry out the orders? Because this is something we hear about like the Nuremberg trials is like people are like I was just carrying out orders and a lot of people say they wouldn't do it. And I genuinely don't believe most people when they say that. And if you don't even think for a second that you would, then I think you're not honest. Because I could certainly see scenarios where you could fall victim to these forces. You could fall victim to this peer pressure. You could fall victim to this fear of death. And essentially, that's what the people were afraid of. They were afraid of stepping out of line because Lord knows the punishment. And, it just shows us that we're not really as noble as we think we are. Our morality only exists because we have the luxury of having it. And once we understand this, then we understand, okay, there's something much deeper here. There's something much more real here, we'll say.
Told them to the point that they actually believed it was killing the person on the other side. And the Asch conformity studies are where a whole group of people were all tested together about which line is longer, and they put a few lines or which color is darker or something like that. And everybody in the group was an actor except one, but that one person didn't know that. They thought everyone else was part of the study. Everyone else said this line is longer, but it was obviously false, right? Like the other line was longer. And a very high percentage of people had their answer matched.
And see, the reason he's using these two different studies is because one's a much lower bar. One is you think that you're harming somebody, and the other is that you're making a little white lie to fit in with the crowd. And I think I may guess this wrong, but to me, the longest line and the darkest color, people will be more likely to disagree on that than the harming one.
Match with what the group said. So going with what the authority dynamic is, going with what the kind of group dynamic is. So when the Nazis were being tried in the Nuremberg trials for war crimes, this was one of the most fascinating things because, like, when we were talking about population-wide dispositions, the Germans were not always genocidal people, right? And so it's like, how did it happen that relatively quickly a population of people who were moral human beings, who loved their children, who
It's like the propaganda. Um, Really if you take the people that did these horrible things at the end of the war and you show them the beginning of the war, they'll be like, "How did we get here?" But it's the escalation, it's the stepping stones. I don't really think this is quite the same, but think of like how people always say that marijuana is a gateway drug, and I really don't agree with that like argument. I think it's kind of a dumb argument. Maybe in some regards it is, but like think of that. It's like the escalation of violence. Like once you do one thing, then it's the next thing. And it was the slow progression of one thing into the next, into the next, into the next. Like, you know, you put a frog in boiling water, it jumps out. If you put a frog in room temperature water and turn on the stove, it doesn't even realize it's being cooked alive. And that's essentially the argument that he's about to make.
You know, we're normal people. We're now at mass throwing kids in gas chambers. And when they were asked, did you believe that everything you were doing was good? 90% of the Nazis said no. They said at first we did, but we were just bringing the people to the camps. We weren't going to exterminate them and et cetera. And it got worse and worse and worse. And by the end, like, no, we didn't think it was.
Again, hell is self-justification. It doesn't end when you start self-justifying. It always becomes worse and worse and worse and worse. Once you can justify one thing, then you can justify the next thing. Once you sacrifice your morality, then you're open to anything. This is something that Ayn Rand said in the Virtue of Selfishness, that the rise of morally gray characters is an extremely alarming sign that something's wrong. Because once you start allowing for the morally gray, then there's no boundary, then there's no limit, then there's nothing saying like this is right versus this is wrong. And I think there's a huge pushback to this, and I've said this previously, but in the next 10, 15 years, maybe even 20 years, there's going to be a huge shift back to perfect heroes, the Superman archetype, the people that aren't morally gray. I think there's going to be a large diminishment in anti-heroes and people that aren't quite goody two-shoes, because it's just, we've gotten to the point where there's people that aren't really even heroes anymore doing heroic things. And, I just don't think people want to see that anymore.
It was good. And then they were asked,
Like Deadpool is a good example. Like Deadpool, is he even a good guy? Like the stuff he does, the rules he's willing to break, like is it you know, same thing with Westerns. Like Westerns worked because we were coming out of a time period in America where everything was so black and white, where everything was so good and bad. And then you had Clint Eastwood ride into town, he would commit crimes, he would do bad things, but in the end he did it in the name of justice, so he was a good person. You look at some of the old Clint Eastwood films, he's not necessarily a hero, but he's heroic. But I think it's going to be a shift more back to like the John Wayne-esque characters where the guy is all good or all bad.
did you try to stop? And all of them said, no, we didn't try to stop. And when asked why, they all quoted the same German phrases that translate to officer's orders. I didn't really have a choice. When people don't feel like they have a choice, they can be complicit with evil, even if they are not actually evil. When people say there's nothing I can do about the world situation, it's the same thing. But rather than the Nazis, it's the distributed system.
Okay, so the thing you can do about the world situation is just not be a be a bitch, essentially. Like I was trying to find a word to use instead of that, but that's really what it comes down to. Don't be a fool. Don't succumb to peer pressure. If something doesn't feel right, don't go along with it. If something is against your moral compass, then say, no, I'm not doing that. Okay? Your boss tells you to, hide some numbers. Your boss tells you to do something illicit, report it. You know what I mean? Like that's essentially what it comes down to. Like there's this weird idea of like, oh, don't be a snitch. It's like, no, stand up for what's right. If that means telling people and your reputation suffering, good. Okay? Like there's far too little people that stand up for what's right in this world, and that's what's wrong in this world. People are willing to let things slip. People are willing to let things, you know, pass by and they don't do anything about it. That's not right. You know what I mean? You got to stand for something. If you don't stand for anything, you fall for everything. It's there has to be a line in the sand. There has to be something that's worthwhile to you.
That they're being complicit with. All right, well, I'll just keep doing all the things that the system is disposing me to do, buying all of the things that I want on Amazon, having them delivered to my door, and pursuing the cultural status things that marketing tells me to pursue, and etc. Rather than unplug from that thing and say the Krishnamurti quote, that it's not a good measure of mental health to be well adjusted to a profoundly insane society.
That's a really good quote. It's not a measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. That's a really good quote. So if people in mass are unhappy, why do you want to be like everyone else? I think this is a sentiment that I echo in a less articulate way than this guy. I don't know who this guy is, but maybe he's worth exploring.
If my society is causing the extinction of 10 to 30 species every day, if it is increasing the chemical pollution to the point that everybody's becoming infertile and having autoimmune diseases and cancers and neurodegenerative.
This is one of the biggest traps too. Everyone talks about carbon emissions, and it's like it dumbs down the conversation to only carbon emissions. The problem. But what's worse is the factory farming, the amount of hormones put in the food, the amount of bullshit put into the ecosystem for the sake of profit. And, you have companies that literally do this. I'm really boiling it down, okay? This is not exactly word for word what they do, but, you know, think about the scene in Fight Club where the guy basically says, you know what, we're going to do a recall because the legal cost for settling all of these injuries that we know are going to occur is greater than the recall cost. Like there's somebody balancing the books. There's someone making these trade-offs. And it's really sick and it's really wicked how you can put profit before the lives of other people. You know what I mean?
Diseases.
And then people boil it down to something even stupider. They're like, this is socialism versus capitalism. It's like, no, those I don't put my worldview into a or a economic system. Like I don't think the world is gonna be solved by an economic system. Because generally they all just devolve into feudalism. That's really all it is. It's just different layers of nobility. Now it's not bloodlines anymore. Now it's, what can you do? What kind of power and wealth can you centralize and then, make money off of that?
If it is rapidly building the most horrifying kinds of weapons possible in arms races, is that a sane society? No, it's a fucking batshit crazy society. Do I want to be complicit with it? Am I willing to be complicit with it? Am I willing to have my spot in the history of the world be at the time when human choice mattered more than any other time? Because previously, you could have the fall of a Roman civilization or the fall of the Ottoman or the fall of the Egyptian vast civilizations, but it still wasn't everything. They were still local civilizations. And you did have civilizations that actually fell because of environmental overreach. That was actually quite common. And the overstripping the environment and your civilization failing is a multi-thousand-year-old story. So you can read books like The Collapse of Complex Civilization by Joseph Tainter that show one of the
It's probably gonna be. I feel like I should start reading these books because I feel like there'll be definitely interesting parallels to make
reasons civilizations
today.
collapsed. They cut down all of the trees, the topsoil would erode, they would lose agricultural capability, and then they'd stop being able to feed the people. Iceland used to be covered in trees. There's no trees. The Vikings destroyed all the trees. The thing that we think of as Iceland is not Iceland. It's Iceland post-deforestation. Some of the great deserts of the world were the results of early human activity that desertified them. But when
I'm pretty sure the Sahara used to be like a really dense forest.
we destroyed the
I think it's actually starting to be a forest again.
environment, it was always just a local environment. It wasn't the biosphere, right? It wasn't the chemistry of the oceans writ large, the atmosphere, the amount of genetic integrity of how many species of soil microbes there are, things like that. There's a study that came out about 6 months ago on PFAS, the fluorinated surfactants, which are basically like, Rain-X and Scotchgard and stuff that we spray on everything. PFAS is found in rainwater everywhere in the world. It is found in freshly fallen snow in Antarctica. It's found in rainwater on every continent. This just
The amount of plastics and everything too. Um, I don't know if people know this or not, but plastic is a byproduct of gasoline, and that's what's in all of our bodies. There's a lot of carcinogens in gasoline.
is one category of pollution that we have made so ubiquitous that if you're off grid collecting rainwater to try to not be part of the system, it's filled with PFAS. And it was at PFAS that was at many times higher than the EPA allowable levels everywhere in the entire world. That's having biological effects, not just on humans.
I think these EPA allowed levels are done based off of studies. And there's all these chemicals that the EPA hasn't begun to study because it's very much underfunded. And it's intentionally underfunded. And it intentionally only puts its focus onto carbon emissions or onto this or onto that. The FDA is the exact same thing. The FDA will only study chemicals that are known to be harmful, and it takes a while for those chemicals to even begin to be studied. So who knows the kind of shit that they're putting in the food right now, and who knows the kind of shit that's going to come out in 20 years that they're like, yeah, this really wasn't good that we put it in our bodies.
The infertility things, but on the soil microbes, on the algae, on everything, right, on the whole planet. So if you see that we're at a time where we could, that the precedent of history is that civilizations end, and they end for reasons that they helped cause. They end for reasons that had to do with self-termination. And even if you say, well, they were beat by someone else, usually it was also that they engaged in rivalry that engendered those types of dynamics with the other people. And oftentimes they got large enough that they got internal infighting and erosion of how their government worked because of corruption and things like that.
Think about it. It's always the ends justifying the means. It's, think about like 2000s US foreign policy. It's like, oh, we must go to war because they're plotting something against us in the future. It's like, oh, this is really a defensive war because in 10 years they're going to have the capabilities to attack us. It's like, what, wh- who, who came up with this Machiavellian idea to sell us a defensive war that's preemptive? Like, it is crazy.
Many of the civilizations that fell to opponents smaller than ones that they had successfully defeated earlier because they had already went through internal decay. So the precedent is civilizations end. Their own growth plays a major role in their own end. But for the first time in history, we have a single global civilization where all of the products we depend on take 6 continent supply chains to make. There is no Chinese civilization and US civilization. And all the US stuff depends on Chinese stuff, depends on cobalt that comes from the DRC in Africa, depends upon.
So this is the thing. So this is something that people don't know. So this mine right here, this thing you see, legally nobody's allowed to be in it. There's not supposed to be anyone in it. It's so toxic that a lot of these people are going to have long-term health effects. And Tesla has contracts that there can't be anyone in these mines. It's not really how it goes. There's all of this illegal labor going on for the sake of saving the environment. And I don't know about you, but I put people's lives above environment. But that's what it takes to have your Tesla. That's what it takes to have your electric car. It's really sickening. It really is. A lot of this bullshit goes on for the sake of progress. And it's like I don't think people that are on their high horse about having electric car even know this fucking bullshit. It's honestly sickening and disgusting. And anytime anyone tries to get on their high horse about having an electric car, show them this picture and talk about the slavery and the forced labor that goes on to run their battery. And I'm no better. I have an iPhone. I don't claim to be above this shit, but like it's just the realities of the world are so much worse than most people even want to admit. And they just have the wool pulled over their eyes. Wool pulled over their eyes. I don't know why I started to slur.
Comes from the DRC in Africa, depends upon oil that comes from the Middle East, et cetera. And so all the manufacturing of our needs comes from a global civilization that is in the same process of self-termination. It doesn't have to go that way. We could go a different way with it. You can imagine that none of the Nazis wanted to defect because if they defected, the idea was they would be killed, right? If they could coordinate and all defect, then there wouldn't have been.
It takes 3% of the population for a revolution to happen. Only 3% of the population revolted against the British Empire, which was the strongest empire in the world. And it really doesn't take that much people. It just takes a few people saying no, few people saying this isn't right for everything to begin changing. And that's really the silver lining. It's that a handful of people saying no is worth more than anything else. Okay? And that's what we always need to remember.
The genocide in the first place. The ability for people today to realize that the trajectory of the world that we're on is not the trajectory that they want, that they are not willing to be complicit with, that the possibility of changing it is a more potent possibility for meaningful contribution than anyone has ever had in terms of scale, and that that's a more worthy use of their life and attention than whatever's currently engaging it. That, I think, is the only sane assessment.
All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode.
That was a pretty good video. With that said, I'm starting to lose my voice. I'm starting to not be able to speak. Love you guys so much. Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. I will catch you in the next one.